In 2015, an odd remark appeared in the Hollywood's post-production archives journalist. It listed three well-known names with just one man, James Garner. No declarations or affirmations were given out, but what was noted overturned all of Garner's definitions. He was more than just a movie star. He might also having been a living witness to an Hollywood's underbelly, where same-sex relationships were hidden by silence, fame, and money. Additionally, for the first time, those pieces are being uncovered. Born James Garner on April 7th, Scott Bummer was born, 1928, in Oklahoma's Norman. He was raised in a family from the working class. His mom passed away. His father remarried a woman while he was young. Later in his memoir, Garner characterized himself as cruel to her stepchildren. A raging childhood and the desire to be independent from an early age formed in he is quiet and very self-reliant. Individuality. Prior to going into the Garner worked in the entertainment industry. A variety of manual tasks, carpet installation, working as an attendant at a parking lot, and taking part in the Korean War. Following after being released, he relocated to Los Angeles and worked as a fashion designer for men. Model prior to learning how to perform at the Berghoff Studio, New York, 1954. It was an esteemed training facility that had instructed numerous well-known Americans method actors. His acting career took off rapidly. Took off after being chosen to play Brett in the television series Maverick. The persona he played was a keen observer who plays cards abilities, adaptability, and a Western approach manly allure. Garner benefited from this role, create the perception of the average American somebody who was well known at the time. In the 1960s, he made the move to the large screen featuring exceptional performances in the Grand Prix, Support, and Great Escape Your Local Sheriff. During his career, he received recognition for his versatility in comedy, action, and genres of drama. However, he didn't show up too often at gatherings for entertainment or talked openly discussing his private life, something exceptional in a sector where personal perception is frequently widely taken advantage of. Garner's quiet demeanor made his personal life a frequent topic of conversation to conjecture, but challenging to access. Individuals that had collaborated with him for many years, Garner was frequently described as a complete professional, but extremely restricted in terms of sharing. As stated by several Hollywood journalists of the 20th century, while other celebrities consented to make concessions with the media to uphold their public presence, Garner deliberately kept a gap himself from the media and declined to reveal anything he thought of not required for film production. Ever since his passing in 2014, some specifics have started to appear in archive materials owned by a film biographer who wishes to remain nameless. Among these resources are handwritten guest lists, private messages, and letters for private gatherings that are held by significant studios. Interestingly, they bring up Garner's intimate connections with a number of men performers who were long suspected of being homosexual. An unreleased document thought to have been authored by a Warner Brothers production assistant identified Garner as a regular visitor to Beverly Hills private parties and the locations of the Chateau Marmont Hotel, where people who work in the entertainment sector, the LGBT community, came together to prevent the public eye. There was no press for these parties. All visitors were insiders, and there were no cameras. From the sector, as stated in a movie researcher at UCLA, where a lot of particular connections started because of they were not permitted to be there themselves. Even though there isn't tangible proof that Garner ever talked candidly about his sexual orientation, his regular appearance in areas seen as secure for the homosexual community prompted inquiries over whether his private life might not have been the same as the portrayal in the media. These suspicions were strengthened even more when he penned a startling note in the Garner files. Line: "Some aspects of myself are unnecessary. Should be aware of, but that doesn't make me any less authentic." Since then, this quote has been often mentioned in posthumous conversations regarding his personal life. And furthermore, Internal records from the Warner Brothers era reveals that Garner was embroiled in a significant contract issue in 1960, when the studio made an effort to prolong his agreement without raising his salary despite his commercial success. An official memo claims that he once declined to sign an agreement on morals, a kind of contract that mandates artists to keep up a public persona that was in line with moral principles, such as control their personal life. This was extremely uncommon during the period when most actors were supposed to follow the rules to maintain their positions. This determination led to many in the sector to think that Garner had something he could defend, not reveal in public. When positioned in addition to his documented relationships with homosexual celebrities of the day, the information above have prompted numerous inquiries regarding deeper associations. Even though there isn't official verification, the time, the setting, and type of his interactions recorded in backstage timetables from Paramount, Universal, and MGM show notable similarities in Garner's itinerary and employment history with those people. Who were the individuals who previously crossed Garner's path in the darkness? Did Hollywood try to hide? When reevaluating previously established partnerships in the obscure regions of the 1950s and 1970s, a number of names appeared to repeat in Hollywood several times throughout the post-production documents pertaining to James Garner. Same-sex romance with Cary Grant. The overlap was not limited to professional schedules, as well as from social networks. Grant and Garner had both gone to private MGM gatherings in Beverly Hills in the latter half of the 1950s, when Garner was at Maverick's peak and Grant had recently finished an affair to recall. An inside note states that at least 5 of them were present. Special occasions for talent under contract, as well as chosen visitors. Regarding the surface, the two did not work together on any initiatives and provided no official business partnership, but their frequent attendance at private events together with an uncommon intimacy shown during business events like the premiere of North by Northwest, in which Garner arrived out of the blue and has caused researchers to make conjectures regarding an unknown relationship. One prominent the key aspect is that Garner stated in a 1983 interview in which he praised Grant's never allowed Hollywood to define his identity. This comment was viewed at the time as a general praise. However, in the light of fresh data that emerged following 2014, it has been seen as a subtle allusion of a closer relationship between the two. The instance in which Grant was alluded to be homosexual by Confidential 1958's magazine also corresponds with an almost 5-month span that Garner suddenly stopped participating in public social gatherings. One particular that was once mentioned by Hollywood Babylon, but never in-depth investigated. In contrast to Grant, the relationship between Rock Hudson and Garner appears to possess more substantiated proof. Following departing Warner Brothers as a result of a 1960 contract disagreement, Garner did not sign with a new studio right away. Around this time, he started to show up at Universal-sponsored events, where one of the studios at the time was Hudson. A pillow talk with leading stars. An uncommon image captured at the Universal Garner and Hudson in a 1961 backlit speaking together in a backstage area off-peak times. Materials used after manufacture from a Universal Studios screenwriter stated at the time that Garner had intimate conversations with Hudson at his Hollywood Hills home, typically on Saturday nights, without help in the present. These gatherings weren't a part of the formal timetable for work, although they corresponded with the time frame in which Hudson has recently finished his therapy. After an FBI probe into his sexual orientation, a few academics trust the connection between Garner and Hudson offered more assistance than romantic. Hudson, used to the stress of leading a double life, could have aided Garner in navigating media examination more delicately, particularly as he was getting ready to go back on screen with prominent parts in action films. Interestingly, Garner joined on just 2 years later to play the lead in Grand Prix, a movie that he had a powerful, self-reliant personality, seen as a new turning point in his career profession. One of the sources from the post-production crew disclosed that Garner was first introduced to an actual European racing car coach in getting ready for the position. This particular detail has never been verified in public, yet an unsigned personal letter mentioned it. Note discovered in the files of Cinema Research of Southern University, California. If Grant was a connection in society and Hudson, an expert bridge, then the relationship with Marlon Brando between him and Garner had an air of resistance and philosophy. Brando had previously instructed at the studio of the actor where, although Garner pursued acting, it wasn't until the middle of the 1970s when they had more significant exchanges. From 1974 until additionally, in 1975, Garner starred in the popular television series Rockford Files sequence that was frequently disrupted by Universal Studios in regard to scripts and scheduling. While that time, he brought legal action against Universal for contract violations and excessive production control. In an unauthorized correspondence thought to have been one line, written by Brando to Garner says, "You don't require them. We never required them to lead genuine lives." The letter has not been confirmed, but the vocabulary and tone are quite similar to Brando's works from the same time period. Analysts think that the proximity between the two was not about romance, but rather same outlook on life and a reciprocal opposition to the entertainment equipment used in industry. Late in 1975, Garner frequently cited guidance from a friend who is better left anonymous regarding how to preserve one's reputation without looking for approval from the media. This particular detail shows several times throughout the production Rockford Files journals. Brando was one of the few performers from the generation that publicly recognized maintaining connections with both men and women. During a Time interview magazine in 1976, he said, "Sex is not something that must be announced." Garner never produced something comparable. Remarks, but his persistent connection with Brando during the year 1975 made many people ponder. Was his court case Universal is a completely separate move, or the outcome of being influenced by a especially significant ally? However, no official confirmations or legal documents exist with relation to these three connections. The frequent overlap in timelines, situations, and occurrences between these numbers and Garner has created an indisputable background. As the tale of secret relationships starts to develop, the response of the people, both then and there are still more questions. Query: media and the general public. March in 1960, the magazine Confidential released in The Western Man is the title of an anonymous article. Stranger Th's Private Life. An article on a well-known television Oklahoma-born actor who was regularly not present at public gatherings for inexplicable causes, continued to show up at clandestine, unrecorded meetings inside the community of artists. Even so, no name was stated. The description fit Garner specifically, who at the time was starring in Maverick and recently signed a new Warner Brothers contract. Garner's answer was obvious. He released a legal notification requesting that the article be revoked and accompanied by a caution that he would file a slander lawsuit if any more there were insinuations. The journal swiftly removed the piece from the subsequent problem and didn't provide any more references. Later, Variety verified the occurrence, although provided no in-depth analysis. This was one of the infrequent situations where Garner addressed the media head-on, and one of the rare occasions when Confidential was made to concede by a famous person. With that in mind, Garner created an unwritten rule with the press. He would only show up in popular media outlets like TV Time, in-depth feature, or guide columns. Using this tactic of authority, James Garner's reputation stayed almost undamaged for many years. Even despite several indications that he might not have lived to the fullest in accordance with the public's presumptive mold, instead than being revealed by the media, the majority of rumors concerning Garner's personal life were spread via unapproved sources from professionals in the field. Assistants, lighting technicians, and former editors frequently described him as a good man who maintained his distance. They talked about Garner as someone who stayed away from the set, eschewed festivities with the cast, and studio that was regularly canceled occurrences if he thought there was excessive media visibility. Interestingly, a number of seasoned experts at Universal remembered that Garner frequently appeared at events that are exclusively attended by a select group of intimate male performers, such as Anthony Perkins and Rock Hudson, but was never observed going with a woman artist to comparable events. By the 1980s, when a few famous people were compelled to discuss their sexuality in public or personal lives as a result of media pressure, James Garner held on to his job. He was never charged or apprehended in a scandal and never took part in dispute, even in a roundabout way. However, to the audience of today, such extended and there is no longer any complete silence, merely as an indication of cleanliness. It grew increasingly suspicious over time. Following Garner's death in July 2014, the public's interest went beyond respecting his career in movies. On internet discussion boards, such as classic fan communities started on Reddit, exchanging old news clippings, taking pictures, and examining each feature in bios and interviews to respond to one unanswered question. Was James Garner live an alternative life, one that was never permitted to appear in public? March 2015, a user who remained anonymous on the forum X shared a diary entry purporting to be from Garner's own works, such as the line, "I'm unable to identify some individuals, however, I will always remember them." Despite the fact that the document was never verified, the image quickly went viral and was shared again by a number of pop culture commentators. At about the same time, and The Hollywood Reporter article elaborated on the subject, posing the question, did one generation of artists is forced by Hollywood to remain hidden in order to safeguard a business image? Popular scholars culture referenced additional comparable instances. Rock Hudson coerced into getting married to maintain his public image. Tab Hunter, his manager, threatened to expose him unless he complied with studio orders. Either Anthony Perkins lived his entire life, and despite this, fear is among the most actors in the system that are in demand. James Garner was never made public. However, this does not imply that he wasn't under the same amount of pressure. One specific detail that caught the public's interest was the Garner's family's response to all the rumors that surfaced following 2015. His Lois Clark, the wife, declined to respond to any inquiries from the press. His daughter, Gigi Garner, only made one post about her. Individual blog. "There are things that my father decided to keep quiet. That is respected by family." The post doesn't rejected or refuted any assertions, but it helped transform the topic into a protracted argument between supporters and critics of culture. To comprehend what James Garner decided not to disclose, the guy who stood by must be looked at. Lois Clark had been with him for about 60 years. Family and marriage. James Garner got to know Lois Clark at a Los Angeles party. The Garner files state that they received only 17 days after being married, meeting, a decision many at the time regarded as hurried, even dangerous. At that moment, Garner had not yet developed into renown, but Clark was an outsider to the sector, a former office worker with Kim, a daughter, from a prior union. However, despite this, public expectations and skepticism as well as studio executives, the nearly 60-year marriage ended only after Garner's passing. Throughout at the time, Lois Clark hosted a unique but a peaceful spot in Garner's life. She did rarely go to entertainment events, appeared on Red with her spouse, carpets, and turned down every interview. Invitations from the press, such as important publications. The few occasions that she named showed up in articles concerning Garner or in connection with charitable organizations that the family sponsored. The majority of their family life was spent in California's Brentwood, is a peaceful residential area distant from Los entertainment centers in Angeles. They survived. Kim and Clark's two daughters, daughter of her former spouse, who Garner took in and brought up as his own, as well as Gigi, their biological daughter, born in 1958. Both remained apart from the motion picture business. Later, Gigi turned into a writer and her manager. Dad's legacy. In an uncommon interview, Gigi told The Guardian, "My parents made a different lifestyle decision. They declined to utilize their union as a publicity tool." One noteworthy aspect is that beginning in 1975, when Garner submitted a claim brought against Universal Studios for contract violation and decreased profits, it was thought that Lois Clark supplied complete logistical backing for the scenes. UCLA's archived materials, according to the law library, she attended the majority of the sessions with lawyers, helped Garner with the document evaluation, creating case files, and conducting analysis conditions of bargaining, relying on her business studies education at a community college of California into the early 1950s. Her extensive participation in both their private lives and legal work done behind the scenes has led to people to think that Clark had deep familiarity with the private elements that Garner decided not to disclose openly. A few unofficial papers said to be preliminary versions of her own journal appeared in the private collection of a Santa Monica-based 2015 archivist. One passage says, "He simply didn't hide from me. Wished to be featured in a headline." Although the veracity of these drafts remains unconfirmed, according to various academics have referenced them at conferences on popular culture as a hint that Lois Clark might have acknowledged the items Garner decided to hide from the public. See you in the next video.